Okay, picture this. It's May 2026. The world's eyes are completely locked on a high-stakes summit in Beijing between US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. But this isn't just another diplomatic photo op. According to reports from the summit, a truly jaw-dropping moment unfolded. President Trump actually publicly agreed with Xi Jinping's assessment that the United States is a declining nation. He literally stated that Xi was 100% correct. Now sure, Trump later clarified he was talking about the socio-economic conditions before his return to office, but the sheer validation of that phrase on the world stage, it sent absolute shockwaves through the geopolitical landscape. So it's a completely startling admission, and it really forces us to ask a monumental question here. Is the era of unquestioned American supremacy already over? Because for decades, the West was the undisputed heavyweight champion, right? Writing the global rules. But behind all those loud headlines we see about tariffs and trade wars, a silent, deeply systemic shift has been quietly taking over. Just look at this headline for a moment from Reuters. This is the news behind today's video. Trump leaves Beijing with few wins, but warm words for Xi. With that said, let's go straight to the intro.
The algorithm buries channels that show the truth like mine every single day. The only thing that fights back is you. One like, one subscribe, turn on the bell icon. That's how the truth about China survives on YouTube. Don't let it disappear. Thank you very much.
All right, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer, the Dragon Ascendant, decoding the hidden levers of power. Here is our mission briefing for today. We're going to peel back the layers of this shift by looking at three specific things. First, we analyze the mineral monopoly. Second, we decode the energy war. And third, we map the science race. Let's get into it. So our investigation starts with China's break glass tool. Now, this isn't a military weapon in the traditional sense. Actually, scratch that. It is a weapon, but it's a systemic lever of geopolitical coercion. Let's go back to 2025. The US pushed these unprecedented trade tariffs past 140%, but President Xi Jinping successfully beat them back. How? By basically hovering his hand right over the glass of this exact tool, threatening to restrict the flow of rare earth minerals and magnets. And you know what? It worked. It forced a détente on terms that were highly favorable to Beijing. To put that into perspective, the sheer scale of this monopoly is just staggering. If we look at data from the International Energy Agency, China controls 90% of global midstream processing for rare earths, and then overwhelming 94% of magnet manufacturing. 94%. The wild part is, the raw materials themselves aren't actually that rare, but the processing, that is a massive bottleneck entirely owned by Beijing. And because they've integrated this whole supply chain, they literally have a chokehold over the materials needed for everything. We're talking from the smartphone in your pocket and your electric vehicle, all the way up to advanced defense systems like missile interceptors and F-35 fighter jets. And Beijing knows exactly how to weaponize this chokehold. They use this supply chain as a hard strategic precondition for stability. You see, the US military has depleted its stockpiles globally, which means replenishing advanced electronics and precision-guided munitions relies almost entirely on Chinese goodwill. So Beijing exploits this specific vulnerability to force trade compromises, to limit US arms sales to Taipei, and to explicitly pressure Washington on incredibly sensitive issues like opposing Taiwan's independence. It's honestly a masterful and deeply consequential use of economic statecraft. But minerals are really just the beginning here. We're witnessing a massive global collision between two totally different energy realities. Think of it as the petrostate versus the electrostate. On one side, you have the fragile US model, which is heavily tethered to Middle Eastern oil and volatile choke points like the Strait of Hormuz. On the other side is China's strategy. They're aiming for 80% self-sufficiency by entirely dominating clean technology. It's a model of secure domestic economic development that is completely insulated from overseas naval blockades. And a financial disparity driving this whole transition is immense. Just look at 2024. China pour $290 billion into green tech. That's nearly tripling the United States investment of around $100 billion. Economists actually call this a Schumpeterian transformation. It's a ruthless strategy of intentionally destroying old traditional sectors so you can reallocate vast amounts of capital right into new high-tech manufacturing, aggressively backing things like solar panels, wind turbines, and lithium-ion batteries. Now, when a geopolitical crisis strikes, these two models are really put to the test. During the recent Middle East conflicts, the reality for the US was pretty harsh. We saw gas spiking to $4.48 a gallon, and consumer inflation hitting 3.8%. Meanwhile, China was resting on carefully constructed buffers. Because of their massive strategic reserves, inland pipelines that completely bypass naval blockades, and an EV adoption rate nearing 50%, while the conflict just fully exposed those deep American vulnerabilities. Suddenly, global reliance on Chinese electrical goods seemed a whole lot safer than dealing with volatile fossil fuels. Which brings us to Section 3, winning the science race, the dramatic shift from global factory to scientific superpower. For decades, we in the West kind of just viewed China simply as the factory of the world. But guys, that era is dead. We are now witnessing a silent but incredibly systemic brain drain. The STEM and research divide is widening at a pace that's hard to even wrap your head around. China's now handing out twice as many STEM degrees as the US and nearly double the PhDs. And according to the Nature Index, by 2026, China's contribution to top-tier scientific papers will double that of America. They've adopted an unabashedly pro-science approach, pledging to boost their overall R&D expenditure by at least 7% every single year. And these aren't just dry academic theories on a whiteboard, these are real-world altering breakthroughs. Take artificial intelligence. Models like DeepSeek V4 are already matching Western capabilities, effortlessly bypassing US export controls. Or look up at the stars. 4 successful robotic lunar landings threaten to literally beat NASA to establishing a permanent lunar presence. And in energy, they've already launched the world's first thorium-powered nuclear reactor. These are real-world consequences that will directly dictate future military and economic dominance. Moving into Section 4, the new multipolar reality, moving beyond a unipolar world. So when you combine that mineral monopoly, the electrostate energy model, and this rapidly accelerating science race, the unipolar era of unquestioned American hegemony just sort of vanishes. We're left with a highly complex multipolar reality, and it's defined by one staggering number: 145. Today, 145 different economies trade more with China than they do with the United States. Through highly strategic investments and technological exports, Beijing has quietly cemented itself as the diplomatic and economic anchor of the globe. All of this leaves us with a truly provocative question. In a world that is increasingly driven by rare earth magnets, advanced artificial intelligence, and green energy technology, who truly holds the leverage for the future? Have we fully grasped the geopolitical earthquake that has already happened right beneath our feet? It's a question that is absolutely going to define the security and economics of the next century. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer to decode this complex reality. Keep questioning, keep learning, and as always, keep looking at the data. Until next time, goodbye.